All right, so I wanted to get this video out before we get a first look at the new FPSL Lounge team tomorrow. A lot of stuff happened really fast, and you kind of tell a lot of behind-the-scenes conversations were happening with this move. So, kind of wanted to just do a little deep dive into it about what kind of like happened here. So, why did the FPSL and Floormen merger even happen in the first place, right? So, first domino to fall was Dimov. So it was rumored for a long time that Dimov wanted to leave NA. He was getting kind of tired of playing on NA ping and just wanted to move back to EU. I think the biggest thing holding him back for a while was he didn't have a guaranteed roster to join, and I don't think he saw the kind of like tier 2 scene of EU as very like viable to making a new team. So I think what essentially kicked off Dimov finally going back to EU was getting a guaranteed roster spot on Leviathan. Then moving forward, Leviathan's going to be a 7-man roster to include ABL, also one of the best players in EU. Again, a very infamous player because of his allegations. I wouldn't say allegations of just using the N-word and just getting banned from Night Shift and then getting banned from DSIs and stuff like this. So Leviathan has committed to ABL though, so they're going to be doing a 7-man rotation to sub him in and out when they're going to do night shifts. I could do a whole video on the ABL situation. I think a lot of people weren't following the scene when the ABL thing happened, so if you're interested in that video, I could do a whole breakdown of that as well. What was actually said, what happened, and kind of like the events that went forward from there. But yeah, so this is kind of what made Dimov move, finally like take the jump and leave NA, essentially. And then on the side of Floormen, or side on FPS Lounge, I should say, there was the dropping of Erebus that happened on April 30th. So they did bring in Poppers to replace Erebus. But I think I can't fully understand what happened with the Rocane thing, because I think Rocane, I don't know if Rocane left FPS Lounge because of the Poppers move. I watch Pierce stream a lot. I watch their scrims a lot. He kind of talked about, he talked with the team that the Erebus thing didn't exactly go down in the right way. And he kind of had a problem with how that was handled, essentially. Even though I would say Poppers probably is a better fit for the team. He comes in, but then Rocane steps away from the team. And I think, I don't know for certain. I have a feeling Rocane kind of got word of that the huge roster swap was going to be happening, and he was going to be left off the team. If I had to guess, that was going to happen. So, with those two perspectives out of the way, we now know the total roster is going to be a merger of Floormen and FPS Lounge, and the roster is going to be DMB, Lefa, Lomain, AVG, Poppers, Xeno. Another thing about this, about kind of why this happened so fast and how you kind of know a lot of behind the scenes chatter was happening, is if you haven't been following since the Hydronation days, the Sneaky Golems days, like all of these dudes have like flip-flop, swapped, played on teams together, have had to like throw teams together because like players like Lomain and players like Lefa took extended breaks from pro, like 4+ months. Back when the scene was very, very early on. So even if you just like look at these, and I learned to put my camera on the top left so I don't block the names like I did last video. Sorry about that. You can even see like Sneaky Golems used to have like League, Xeno, Ranger, Goober, Rocker, DMB, right? So this was eventually the team that became Floormen, Sneaky Golems. And then it says FPS Lounge, but this was Hydronation, had like Hydration, Lomain, Lord NM, Lefa, AVG was on this side before, and then you just look at another series. So this was when Melee Creeps finally, before Melee Creeps took a break. So if you didn't know, Melee Creeps took like an extended break for a while. And then the only players who kept playing pro, I think, were Fishcake and Scout for a while. But then if you just look at the Sneaky Golem side here, Goober's been on Sneaky Golems, Rocane had been on Sneaky Golems, League, this is when AVG's here, even Hydration had been on Sneaky Golems. And if you just keep going through, you can just kind of like see. This is Valhalla, so this was again like when Melee Creeps was taking a break. Fishcake was on this team. Scout was on this team. DMB was on this team. Zersby was on this team. Buzz, who is no longer playing pro, was on this team. And essentially all this ended once FPS Lounge entered the scene. They bring in Pierre to coach. And their roster was Hydration, Snakes, Lefa, Lomain, Erebus, and Roken. So this is kind of when roster mania of these teams kind of like stopped, because again, once FPS Lounge comes in, contracts are involved, these players are getting paid. So there was just like a clear, this is just like the best opportunity in the scene outside of maybe Melee Creeps, because Melee Creeps can like kind of build their own thing a lot easier than most teams. They have like big personalities on the team and big streamers who can kind of like, again, what they want to do is like not sign with an org, maybe just partner with an org instead of like being essentially day-to-day operations ran by an org, versus FPS Lounge has come in and acquired Hydronation, which is a very different like relationship there, right? This is expectations matter a lot more, results matter a lot more, and so like I was saying earlier with like the Erebus change, I think this is why someone like Pure has a lot more input now on, hey guys, this isn't like early esports. We're not early esports of the scene, I should say. I keep saying early esports, but this isn't like the early developments of the scene anymore. Like, we're not going to be doing moves like this and just like plugging and playing people. Like, we need to make these things work. And I think that's a great way to segue into why were these moves made, right? Like, why did this 6 get picked to be on the FPSL roster? And in my opinion, the best way to show this is, that's right, political compass time for Deadlock, okay? Political compass time. We've entered the arena, okay? So you can tear this thing to shreds. I just needed essentially a heuristic to kind of like explain what I'm going to show to you here. So the basic thing I would explain is M1 doesn't necessarily mean just gun damage. What I literally mean by that is, like, to do damage, you have to press the M1 button, right? So Mirage is a perfect example of this. Like, he has his scarabs and he has his gin marks and stuff, but if you do not hit the fucking M1 button on the person, they're not going to die, okay? And then you can pick this apart, like, why is Silver over here? Silver has Bola, has utility, has movement, you can move it over here. But in my head, if you're not hitting this button, you're not going to kill someone on Silver. And then with Spirit, literally, I am breaking it down as, like, I use these buttons to kill you, okay? It's not perfect. You could pick this apart. It's totally fine. I just need a base idea to kind of explain what I'm going to get into, right? So, if you look at the old rosters, so old Floormen had DMB, who's like much more of an M1 player. DMB always also did have a great Billy that he eventually picked up when he was on Melee Creeps. So where is he here? Yeah, so he did actually have a pretty good Billy. He did kind of like start to shift towards the end of his reign with Melee Creeps to like kind of start playing more, but DMB is for sure more of a M1 centric player, right? Like, he wants to play, he can somewhat play frontline, which is over here, and some of the heroes he has are like less utility, but all in all, DMB is a M1 player, right? League was like more of like a M1 player, and that's kind of how I'm breaking this down. Frontline is heroes like Abrams, Geist, even like Geist is a damage dealer, right? But Geist is like high HP pool, wants to get in your face, does hybrid damage with her abilities plus gun. And then Warden is someone like does a lot more damage with his M1, even though back in the day you could build hybrid builds and stuff like this. And then again, there's like heroes on here like Viscous. Like, back in the day, there was the gun express shot Viscous build that got nerfed out. I'm just kind of just giving you a baseline idea of like what everything does here, right? So if you look at the old Floormen roster, the difference between this being a normal political compass versus not is there is an objective better place to be, which is in the middle, which is what DMOF was, right? DMOF can play like literally everything, okay? DMOF was, oh, don't have him ready. Whoops. Okay, anyways. DMOF can play everything, okay? I've seen him carry games on Wraith M1. His Shiv is insane. He can play the Paradox. Like, he can literally play everything, okay? Even if he doesn't have games on some heroes, like he doesn't have a ton of frontline heroes, like he mainly relies on Shiv. He's played a couple Abrams games, stuff like that. All in all, DMOF is a player that can play literally everything, right? That's why he's such a like sought after talent. That's why NA teams are willing to like be like, hey, play on high ping, I don't care. Like, you're a very like high variance player in terms of like what picks we're going to bring in for you, versus again like someone like Xeno. He's going to play more like utility, like support. He can play frontline, he can play flex spirit. But all in all, like Xenon's going to be more of like your doorman player, your rem player, stuff like this, right? So this is old Floormen. So pretty good balance, all in all, honestly. Like they're lacking a little bit on utility, like flex spirit kind of players. So Demov kind of got pushed into that a little bit more. Even League, we saw League playing like his like McGinnis and stuff like this. So League does have picks down here, even though I would say League again is more of like an M1 centric player. And then if we look at old FPS Lounge, you can see they had a much more balance to the other end, right? Like they had poppers and hydration. Hydration, I think a lot of people would put him like literally like in the kitty corner here. The weird thing about hydration is, despite not playing a lot of the stuff recently, he has a huge pool. He had a great Calico. He was a Monkrell player. This Warden was like Spirit Warden back when you could play Spirit Warden, so like kind of like Engage Warden / Frontline type of thing. He played Abrams, he could play the Victor. Like he played a lot more heroes than was being shown on the FPSL once they swapped over to FPSL, because he kind of got pushed more into like a certain box type of thing. Okay. And then I guess like the most controversial thing on here, I made these mainly on like data. Shout out to Deadfrag, by the way. I could not make videos without Deadfrag. Unbelievable website. They have like great data just on everything. Even if they don't record the data, they record that like matches happened. So big shout out to them. Could not make videos like this without them. So this is like 90% data and like 10% opinion. Like someone like Floormen, right? A lot of people would put him dead center here, be like, Floormen can play everything too. He's one of those players, right? Like he can, no matter what you need him to do, he can do that. I do agree with that, but I think I do have a slight advantage to Demov over that, because I think Floormen is a player that really relies on agency. I think he's at his best when he's playing heroes that he can kind of control the tempo of the game with, which I think frontliners, you are much more trying to play positionally with your team or engaging with your team to make things happen, versus you're kind of the one going in and then getting people to follow up on you type of thing. Which is like characters like Shiv, characters like Celeste, characters like Mina. But again, why he is more centric is he does play a ton of stuff. He plays the Viscous. He has Abrams games. He plays a lot of champs like just like 1-0. I think the only person with more heroes played than him is League and Demov, I think. But again, why I say it's 90% data, 10% opinion. If you're just like perma losing games, like Rocker, for example, we're not going to really talk about. Rocker has a lot of heroes that he like tries out and tries to play, but hasn't really had success on. So I don't really consider you more of like a utility spirit player, because I think even though you're picking these heroes, you're not exactly having the success, right? So all in all, we look at these two. So old FPSL, probably too many M1 players. Maybe not enough people who could play a variety of stuff. I think Poppers, from what's been shown, could probably play a lot more than this. I'm just putting him here because I wasn't following the competitive scene as much in 4-lane. For those who don't know Poppers, he's kind of like a mysterious figure, doesn't have any social media, is very low-key. Poppers was like, I'm pretty sure rank 1 NA back in 4-lane meta, so he can play a bunch of stuff, but in terms of what we've seen in the competitive scene so far, just haven't seen like what he can fully do. So I could definitely see Poppers being up here. The biggest problem with old FPSL was honestly Snakes. I think Snakes improved a lot on his time in his short span of like pro teams. He was on Pierre's old team. I forget their name now. He actually came over with Pierre to FPS Lounge. So he was growing his pool, but Snakes was a very, very one role centric player. He was a frontline player, right? And even in being a frontline player, he had a smaller pool. Didn't have a lot of things he could whip out as much. I wrote something down here. Yeah, so he was like Abrams, Billy. He was known for his Calico. That's kind of what got him into the pro scene to begin with. Was he had a very strong Calico. But again, like as the game's moving on here, teams are starting to shift more towards, we want players that are very versatile, that can play a lot of different things, right? So then that obviously takes us to, the new roster. So this is the new FPSL roster, and immediately you kind of see the pairing of AVG and Floormen, I think, is the key of this roster. AVG, I would say, is more at best frontline players, but AVG is a grinder. He will pick up, do things. He'll grind to do characters. He just had a scrim where he went like 15-0 on Lash, right? Like, he can play more stuff, and he's more towards the center, right? So when you just compare these guys, the new roster, to the other rosters, you can see a lot more push towards the center, right? And again, versatility is what these teams are going for. They want more. No, I messed this up. That's why I was like, where the fuck did it go? These teams want more versatile picks. They want to be able to put other people on other things, and they kind of just want to have only a couple players that are like dedicated to a role, right? So like on the new roster, the biggest commitment to a role, I would say, is going to be DMB is going to be their M1 player, and then Xeno is going to be like kind of their support player, and then everyone else is going to have a lot more versatility to what they can play. Now, the problem with that, as you can see, you very smart person who are looking at this, is this. I think the biggest problem that could face this roster is DMB and Leffa clashing hits, okay? Because they are both more M1-centric players. Leffa has shown he has a willingness to try other things, has not had a ton of success, I will say. If you look at his best heroes, it is still like the Infernus, 7. His Celeste's been good. I'll give him that. Mirage, Wraith. But as you go down here, he's been struggling on frontline. He's kind of struggled on Flex Spirit. His shivs looked okay. Even like off M1s like Viper, he hasn't showed a lot of promise. And I think the biggest thing that's going to actually, where the clash could happen over time, right? You know, I think in the honeymoon phase, people are going to be down to play whatever. They're going to just kind of, you know, if you've ever been in a competitive environment, there's kind of like this feeling out period where you're a little more forgiving of people like kind of like stepping into your pools and kind of like being more agreeable in some sense in reviews and stuff like this. But if you look at the top picks here, Lev is an M1-centric player, loves to play Infernus. DMB is an Infernus player, loves to play like M1s as well. So I think the biggest thing that could really tank this roster is if these guys do not see eye to eye. And like, if they start picking Infernus, and then there's like, who's going to play the Infernus? Who's going to be the like primary? Who's going to play P1? Even if we pick the Infernus, are you going to be like P3 Infernus? Are you going to be, you know? So I think that's kind of the biggest problem I could see with the roster. But again, I think going back to Pierre and his influence on the team, I think he is going to be able to navigate these things, be able to figure it out. But again, with it being FPSL, the results play a huge factor in this roster. And if this team isn't able to kind of like put their differences aside and kind of flex over more, like will DMB play Billy more? Will they just put Leffa on P1 more, or as like the primary M1? Like, who knows, right? But that's kind of what I want to get into, kind of like a preview of this team. I do think it is a better roster all in all. I think just in terms of like top level talent, I think Floormen and having Floormen and AVG on the same team, I think is just a perfect pairing, in my opinion. You want players more towards the center of this kind of compass as we're talking about. And then I think internal strife could be a problem with the M1 slot. But all in all, who knows, right? I think they could probably figure it out. I'd be shocked if this team isn't the second best team in NA. Just give them some time to develop, but we will be able to see them tomorrow. And yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to talk about.